Hi guys. There's a couple of other things that I kind of wanted to go over, and in terms of composition, especially if you're using a certain number or item in your composition, it sounds pretty basic, but one of the things that really looks very symmetric and kind of dull can be an even number of objects, especially if they're spaced out more evenly. Think about four cupcakes sitting on in a row or in a box, and then if you add a fifth, that somehow, for some reason, adds a little bit of visual interest because we like to complete in sets by adding another visually. So actually, sometimes just using an odd number of something will be a little bit more fascinating. Finally, last but not least, we also sort of want to think about negative space and activation. So when we are thinking about composition, we are thinking about the elements that are present, but we're also thinking about moments of rest. And this becomes really important because compositions can start to become a little bit too busy. What that'll end up doing is it'll end up breaking up the lines of the basic shapes that you're using. So if you just have something, it's really about hierarchy, right? So hierarchy is what you see first versus what you see second. And I'm gonna go ahead and just show a couple images of collages right now. And I think this is a really good way to sort of go into this particular exercise that we're gonna be going into. So I've got some collages up here. I have just Googled them. So what you'll notice is that some of these look a lot like they have no hierarchy and you're just being bounced around the page. And you're looking at words, you're looking at images. All these images seems to be the same. They seem to be the same and they seem to be important. Now, I can't really tell if there's any compositional structure from this because honestly, these kids are all creating different structures, but they're all over the canvas and none of them have any dominance, nor are they overlapping or sitting on top of each other. In the meantime, something like this does have an organizational strategy. So this means that, for example, even though we are using a lot of busy images, we've at least decided that the images that are busy are going to cover a certain part of the skin. And that is like one form of organization. Another is this form of organization, where we're just using the negative space to decide it. I still don't think these are really getting to be what some of the collages can be. So like, for example, when we get to something like this, we start to see that there's an interplay between visibility and lack of visibility. What I mean by that is there are images in this where there are just elements of color and elements of text, but they've eliminated and only selected to allow for some elements of text. And the hierarchy is very clear. We're supposed to be seeing a woman. And this hierarchy is achieved through collage by being aware of the fact that, some words would be too distracting and we don't want to see them. So they've eliminated a lot of these particularly really prominent words by overlapping them with other things. Finally, they've really used color as a strategy. And while this is a pretty basic composition because it's relatively triangular, it's not ineffective, It has its pros and its cons. So similarly, a lot of collage work that is done successfully will have organizational, compositional strategies which tend to simplify everything that you're looking at. So another example, this is a little bit clearer right here. And this one, for example, is really playing with our idea of space. It's using detailed drawings in the foreground, less detailed items that look further back in the background, and they're being a little cognizant of the fact that there's an organization here of space that we want to see. So this is something that is looking pretty seamless, and a lot of it is about overlapping edges and essentially these sections of the canvas where people are being included and they're being added into one piece directly over another. And it's very tight. And there's also sort of some sense of perspective almost that seems to exist that's suggesting that this is a perspective, but it's not perfect. It's a little outlandish. So this has like an organizational strategy. Finally, I would say that color as well. The red is what I see moving throughout the canvas. It's repetitive. You could say that this is also repetitive, but I do find this more disjointed, even though it's a very different strategy, because the strategy is just to give an example of what all the red items are, quite literally. So it's very simplistic. I mean, then there's another strategy, which is sort of like which is the category of the absurd, which is where you make a suggestion of something by putting pieces together in a collage, and then you take or remove a really important part of that composition and add something that looks similar to what it would be in that thing, but it's just different enough that it's absurd. And this sort of suggestion is another compositional strategy. Now, there are compositional strategies going on here. There's a triangle. There is a circle over here. It is still a very balanced, centered composition, but the idea of replacing the head for this really is what makes it sort of work in some ways. So these are all strategies. Now, the reason why I bring up these strategies is because in the next iteration of what we're going to be doing, we are going to be working with collage. And one of the things that is really important when working with collage is to be aware still of what your subject is and what your hierarchy is. So if you're going to pick a person as your subject, you don't have to include all of them, you don't have to use all of them, and you can use elements that are decorative behind them, but you still have to figure out, okay, this element transitions into this, which is helping us look at her, which is helping us look at this. So there's the repetition of the snake element. And so our eye is kind of moving like this, I feel personally. So essentially all your compositional strategies really apply to collage, as well as your idea of what comes first and what doesn't. So in the next section of the lesson, I want you guys to be working on creating collages. And the collages are going to vary. So if you'd like, you could create something from a textbook that just has one and then work with some elements that are decorative. But what I'm really trying to get you guys to do is to move the elements around the composition. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a suggestion. I'm going to work with a couple things, and then we'll come back to this. So for the next section, I would say maybe start cutting out some elements. When we cut out elements, we look for things that we think are important that we're going to be able to use. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time to work on this. You want to think of collecting maybe some letters, maybe some numbers, maybe some subjects, maybe some background objects, and also just maybe some textures that you may like, that you may want to use. And even though we're going to simplify this down a lot and then over the next couple of iterations, it's a really good exercise in figuring out what you want to put in the foreground and the background. Finally, with collage, we have the really unique ability to move things around on the page before we glue it. So we're going to be really taking advantage of that.